Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Health Institute Smart Life Forum program. Our primary mission is to provide credible health information to the public with an emphasis on optimal wellness, anti-aging medicine, and longevity. We are a charitable nonprofit organization. Your fees at the door and any donations you give to us are tax deductible. And if you'd like more information about that, you can please see Susan at the desk there. The admission at the door is $10 per night, but an annual membership of $60 gets you entry for a year, which is a great deal. Brief logistical information, I'm sure Eric will edit this out, is the restrooms are out this door to the left down the hall. You'll see the men's room on the right and then the ladies' room further down on the right. Okay? And there's also more information you can find out about our organization at our website, which is www.svhi.com, Silicon Valley Health Institute, svhi.com, including videos. You'll notice we're recording tonight's session, and we've been doing this for 20 plus years, something like that. Steve's one of the original people here that's been here for a long time. And kind of chuckling over there. So if you're interested in lots of different subjects that have been covered in the past, you can go to the website and you can review videos of past events. So you can see we have some potluck food with us here tonight. It's a cruel thing to have a program and make you stare at food while we're talking. So the format tonight is going to be, we'll do our usual kind of open session questions and answers. Then we will stop and have some food. And then we'll get back together and we'll have our speaker. We've got one speaker for tonight, so I expect that we'll probably be leaving a little bit earlier than we normally do. Normally the program can go up to about 10 o'clock, but we should end quite a bit before that. Okay, with that said, I'd like to open the floor up for questions. If you have a question about any kind of an area in health and well-being, or if you have perhaps some kind of an announcement to make, please raise your hand, and do wait for me to bring you the microphone. The recording will not pick up the sound well if you don't have the microphone, and use the microphone, hold it close to your mouth when you're speaking so you're heard very well. Okay, right here.
My wife has recently had a second bout with shingles. And she had it maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and it really affected her vision and so forth. But this time it's on her back. And I just wonder if there's any, the latest treatment for something like shingles.
Steve?
Yeah, I've written a book on the subject. It's freely available at projectwellbeing.com on the Steve page. It's called the BHT book, and it's about the use of FDA-approved food preservative as an antiviral agent. And it turns out that one of the best ways you can apply BHT is through the skin by dissolving it in refined coconut oil, so it doesn't have a smell or that kind of thing, so that you don't end up smelling like a coconut for days on end. But it's amazingly applied topically for shingles. It's just amazingly effective, very inexpensive, and I've used it myself for that application. Normally, shingles is a very painful condition. And I once had a known sensitivity, a reaction, a bad dermatitis reaction to urethane adhesives, and was using them a second time. This was in my mid-40s or so. And I was extremely careful about not touching the urethane or getting it in my hands, and yet I had a trigeminal breakout on my forehead, and I figured it was because I did get some on my hands, and I normally do my hair like this, and therefore I had transferred some. So it went for almost a week without me knowing what was going on, and it was unusual because I had no pain at all. And so I didn't make the jump to shingles. But when my father, who's a doctor, saw it, he said, "Oh my God, you've got shingles." And so I went home, and this was on a Friday night, and I started applying BHT topically on Friday night and took 20 milligrams, or 20 milligrams of B12, which is like thousands times the normal dose. And my father also wrote me a prescription for an antiviral drug, so I went home on Friday night and started applying BHT, and by Saturday it had faded, and by Sunday night you could barely tell. There was only a slight redness where the breakout had been. And I went ahead and filled the prescription the next day, but I really didn't need it. So it's, you know, $1 worth of BHT and $1 worth of coconut oil. So it's incredibly inexpensive.
Where do you get BHT from? Okay.
It's online. You can get it on Amazon. You can buy it. It comes in 2 grades, the commercial grade and pharmaceutical grade. And that's what you want, is the food grade, the high-end material. And it's sold by companies for purposes like making candles and stuff like that. So it's an unusual market, but it's not hard to find as food grade BHT, and it sells for about $20 a pound, which is enough to last you for most of your lifetime. Yeah, yeah. And then you just buy a jar of refined coconut oil, which is tasteless and odorless, so that you can do it as an application, and just warm up the oil, mix in about 10% BHT. If you want 15%, that's fine. And once it's dissolved, just start applying it liberally, and works really well.
Cool. There was, excuse me, a discussion that I followed at, this was inside my company, where people are talking about this, and apparently there's a relatively new shingles vaccine that people can get, and I think it'll work for people who already are infected with the virus. Tried that, it didn't work? Interesting, okay. Yeah, I don't know I don't remember the name of it. I could look it up maybe during this thing. So, okay, other questions? Silence, crickets, okay. Okay, here we go. Wait for the mic, please.
I have actually 2 questions. One is, how do you treat high cortisol levels? And the second one is, do you have any nature remedy for eczema that really helps beside cortisone?
So how do you treat high cortisol, and possible ideas for treating eczema, right? Any? Okay, well, here, let's go over there. It's our speaker tonight, Dr. Harry Wong.
I won't be speaking about this topic, but I do have some information for that. With high cortisol, there's 2 things. First, you have to realize that cortisol is a hormone in response to some kind of stressor in your body. So that could be physical or emotional, and it would be a good thing to try to dive into what's causing cortisol to go high, right? It's a stress hormone. But in the meantime, there is a supplement called Enterophos by, I forget the name of the company, I can give that to you. But what it does is it keeps you, you feel jittery, it kind of keeps you awake and can't go to sleep. Is that sort of the symptom that you get? Right. If you take Enterophos before you want to go to sleep, it absorbs the excess cortisol in your body and you go to sleep, right? High cortisol, you know, people experience high cortisol, for example, if you're under a lot of stress. If you came home and news reporters are at your home and realize you won $30 million, you won't be able to sleep that night. You're under stress, good stress, but you're not going to sleep because your cortisol levels are out the roof, right? You're excited, you're awake, you're not sleeping. If you take Enterophos, 2 before you go to sleep typically, depending on how high the levels are, it'll bring it down and allow you to sleep. So that's a stopgap measure for that. All right? Enterophos. It's phosphorylated serine is what it is.
And do you get it at Amazon? Or?
From Amazon? You get it from Amazon? Yeah.
Okay. And Steve said, and probably a local health food store. Did you want to add something to that? Or okay.
yeah, you're not going to find BHT at your local health food store. You know, health food stores selling a preservative, there's something wrong with that marketing. I mean, when I was running a mail order company back in the late 70s through the middle of the 80s, we sold BHT, but because I was a proprietor in the company, I couldn't talk about it. All these people were telling me stories about shingles and CMV and Epstein-Barr and herpes and on and on and on. And also, every other story was about how wonderful their skin looked after they started taking BHT. But because I was in a company selling it, I couldn't talk about it. So as soon as I left the company, that's the first book I wrote, because I had all this information I had collected and I needed to put it out there. But there's another story with cortisol, in that cortisol and thyroid hormone are like linked together, very, very closely linked together. And so normally cortisol would be your emergency energy and thyroid would be your basal energy. And there's a problem that happens with people who have hypometabolic conditions where their thyroid really isn't up to snuff, and their adrenal gland will fill in. When their metabolism reaches a crisis and their energy is bottoming out, for example, in the middle of the night when they're sleeping, they will often go into a high cortisol triggered event that may cross over in the adrenal gland to adrenaline and norepinephrine, which will then wake them up and they feel very nervous and edgy and anxious in the middle of the night, because that's the time when your metabolism normally bottoms out. So you have your peak energy in the afternoon and your trough energy in the middle of the night, and oddly, maybe, that's when a lot of people pass gracefully. When they say they passed in their sleep, they die sometime between 2 and 4 and 6 in the morning, because that's when the energy, you know, bottoms out. Well, if you're waking up at that time, it's probably because your energy is too low at that time, and the cortisol is designed to prop up your metabolism. It's a stress mechanism, but it's also the stress of darkness. Normally, we live exposed to light all around us, except at night, and so cortisol starts, you know, during the day when we have all this light. Our energy reserves are supported by all the photons that are coming into our body, and then when the sun goes down, our cortisol starts to rise, and it rises and rises and rises all night because of dark adaptation stress. And so that's normally when you look at a cortisol profile, you find this kind of a thing, that if you go and get salivary testing, you'll find you do a morning test, and then you do a noon test, and you do an afternoon test, and an evening test, and you see this profile where it's high in the morning and it drops off during the course of the day. And this is because we're exposed to light at this time, and it's helping our mitochondria generate energy. And that's the end product of thyroid hormone, is that it goes to our mitochondria and to our nucleus, and that upregulates our mitochondria. And so, you know, people with, you know, cold hands and feet, and slow pulse rate, and sleeping issues, borderline depression, tendency towards constipation, wanting to take a nap in the afternoon, these are all signs of hypometabolism. And it's often misdiagnosed by doctors because the range for thyroid tests is so hugely wide that you can be within that range and have functional hypothyroidism. So this is routinely missed by the medical system. So that's one of the things that I would suggest, is going back to your medical records and looking at your thyroid test results and seeing if you're in the bottom part of the range. And if so, talk to your doctor about possibly doing a thyroid trial to see if your cortisol will come down when you supplement thyroid hormone. Another thing is that you can deliberately artificially create sunlight by infrared phototherapy. So you can see, if you do phototherapy for a while and you retest your cortisol, does that bring it down?
Great. It's kind of almost a whole talk. All right. We had a couple other hands here, either to add or maybe somebody wanted to speak towards the eczema. Okay. Apparently not. Okay. There was something, questions or something else? Okay.
So arthroscopic surgery, I'm scheduled for one for my knee joint, and so torn meniscus, they just want to trim off the torn meniscus. But I'm getting a lot better, and I was reading about a study in Australia where they did placebo arthroscopy, and there was no difference. So does anyone know more about that?
I have heard stories of people who, there was a guy I was just hanging out with last Thursday who was talking about how he had torn meniscus, and he went and did a lot, he was a bicyclist, and he doubled his bicycling time and did a lot of exercise, and then went back to the doctor said, you're fine. So these things do kind of heal. And, well, he was like 55, 60, no, he was over 60. Yeah, so motion, mechanical motion, and that kind of stuff helps your knees to heal. If it's tearing or kind of damaging or painful, it might be the best thing to do the surgery. So, I mean, you'll have to heal after the surgery too, but that might be the best thing. Any other perspectives that want to share?
I was in the same position like you, and I had surgery, and I had pain for more than 1 year, and I cursed the day I did the surgery, honestly, because when I go upstairs, I still have pain, and I didn't have that before. And I wouldn't do it again, honestly, but that's just my personal opinion.
It's, yeah, mileage may vary. More for that? On that? Okay.
Yeah, I actually study these kind of subjects. If I had like a meniscus problem or ACL, I would highly recommend before any surgery get exosome or stem cell shots, and then it might just heal naturally.
Thank you. Exosomal stem cells.
Yeah. I think Steve can say some more about those.
Yeah, stem cell therapy can be very useful for healing joints. Joints have a potential problem of being inside a capsule and not being well served by blood supply. So a lot of things can accumulate in that, and one of the problems is the nightshade vegetable family produce a chemical called solanine, which is a group of chemicals that have certain kinds of insecticide properties, and so the plants grow them to prevent predators, but when humans eat them, these chemicals can be metabolized very slowly, and they can build up in your joints and cause the equivalent of arthritis symptoms. And some people are sensitive to solanine and other people are not, and I suspect it has something to do with how these chemicals partition into the joints. And so if there is something like that going on, that will inhibit the healing. Local joint inflammation prevents healing. Now, the other thing is that ligaments and tendons and those structures are made out of a protein called collagen. And collagen protein has very specific nutritional requirements, one of which is copper. It's often overlooked. You can actually buy transdermal copper, and I'm looking forward to a new high-potency copper that's coming on the marketplace soon. This is something that's not only overlooked by most people looking for therapy, it's easy to apply to the knee, but it's also the case that one of the family of drugs, the fluoroquinolines like Cipro, where they have this warning on the label about joint problems, that your ligaments and tendons can fall apart in days to weeks, and those antibiotics are copper chelators. So they pull the copper out of your joints and your joints fall apart. And so the idea of putting copper into your joints might give you information. By putting on the transdermal copper, you can judge what happens to your joint pain to get an idea of maybe you've got a type 2 copper deficiency, and that's what's causing your ligament weakness and the damage and the inhibition of healing.
Great, thank you. Maybe take time for one more question, if there is. There was maybe a hand here? Yes, no? Okay. Give us an announcement.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Hong Jan. I'm going to be a speaker in January. But since you're here already, I just want to let you know that next month I'll be here talking about longevity practice, and also we are running a longevity trial with 1,000 participants, and there are 2 arms. One is observational, and another one is interventional. Basically, the interventional ones is to try to use therapy by MD and try to help reverse aging. And on the observational trial, it's going to be measuring your biomarkers, biological age clocks every year, and see how you do every year. So if you're interested, come back in January. But if you can't, please go to my website and sign up and decide later. So the website is www.elon, like Elon Musk, elonlife.com.
So that's ELON life.com. Okay, great. And, okay. Yeah, yep.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, I host a monthly meetup. And it's what I call the self-care working group, and we talk about this kind of stuff in the meeting. And it's open to any topic that anybody wants to come in with in terms of questions and personal health issues that you're struggling with. And I'm having a special end-of-year meeting on December 29th. That's the Sunday after Christmas and before New Year's. So you should be somewhat recovered from both of them, or recovering in preparation for the final event. And so if anybody's interested in attending that, an RSVP is required. And it's through meetup.com. How many people here are members of Meetup? Okay. So if you go into Meetup and you do a search for Project Wellbeing, you'll find a listing for that event on January 29th. It's a Sunday from 1 to Project Wellbeing. That's the name of the Meetup group. And it's the Sunday the 29th from 1 to 4 o'clock. And it's at my house in Cupertino, and that's basically where 85 and 280 meet. So on a Sunday, it's a pretty easy way to get. It's pretty easy to get to it. No, well, there is going to be one topic, and that's going to be I'm going to do a hydrogen generation demonstration. I'm going to build a hydrogen generating device, and I'm going to fill up people's plastic bottles with hydrogen gas if they want to try it on for size. So I'm going to do that in the middle hour. But other than that, it's whoever shows up puts their favorite topic on the board, and then it gets discussed during the course of the afternoon.
Okay. Great. Project Wellbeing, and is the self-care working group, is that part of the meetup name? That's self-care working group. Okay, good. All right, and Hong Zhang just announced the next meeting in January. Just a reminder, everybody here probably knows this, but we're here on the 3rd Thursday of every month. So that's in January, and then in February the speaker will be Elizabeth Plorde. I believe that's that right? Yeah, on EMF health effects. Yep, very good.
She has written books on EMF and sunscreen.
Very good. Okay. And with that, we're working up to our speaker.